camera, and this video is my documentation and observations of driving out west. My fiance Young and I, plus our Great Pyrenees Misty, drove across the country from West Lafayette, Indiana to Torrance, California. We passed through 9 states and covered 2,100 miles in 4 days. This is our journey in a nutshell. So our first day we started in West Lafayette and we drove all the way to Salina, Kansas. So we passed over 3 state lines. Yeah, you'll see over the course of the video. So right now we're in Indiana. This is my home. I've lived here since I was like 12. So basically there was no one on the roads here. We left on a Thursday morning and we're just driving across the state road and there's not really any other cars. But I can just say both Young and I were so excited to finally be on the road. It took a really long time for us to pack up all of our stuff and get ready to go, and he had just finished his PhD, so we're super excited to only be responsible for driving. So then we passed over into Illinois. I gotta say, it's kind of the same as Indiana, very flat, lots of corn. So then we crossed over the state line to Missouri. We stopped in Hannibal, Missouri for lunch at this really tasty sushi place that was just on the side of the road basically. And we got to get out, have some sushi, and enjoy ourselves. But yeah, I think it wasn't as boring as I thought to drive through Missouri and Kansas, even though I grew up driving through Missouri. It was really pretty in some parts, and it was kind of nice just to be the only little car driving on the road sometimes. So we spent the night in Salina, Kansas, and then our second day we drove through the rest of Kansas all the way to Boulder, Colorado. There's some really lovely terrain in Kansas. It's actually kind of hilly in some parts, and one thing I did to occupy myself was this license plate game. So I made this bullet journal spread and I marked off all these plates, and I'll check in later in the video with the plates I got. But then we passed over the state line into Colorado, and one of my favorite moments from the trip was just seeing that line of blue mountains in the distance, and I remember pointing that out to Young and being like, whoa, that's so cool. So that night we stayed in Boulder, like I said. And then the next morning we got up, and this was one of the first things that we saw. You can see the mountain lines in the mountains from the hotel we were staying in, but it was really amazing to get up so close to those. Also, one thing I noticed was that the bike lifestyle is really big here. I feel like almost every other car just had a bike on the back of it, or people were just biking along the road. Also, one thing I want to say is that Young drove like 95% of this trip because he just likes driving, so I was totally fine with that. So once we got into the really mountainous regions in Colorado, we saw people doing all these different outdoor activities, which was so fun to watch. There were people hiking, there were bikers, some people were tubing, and that was so cool to see just right on the side of the road. I definitely have way too many clips of Colorado and Utah and all these really mountainous areas and the Rocky Mountains in general, because where I'm from it's not like that at all. So most of this part of the trip I honestly just stared out the window the whole time. Sometimes we passed through these areas where there were signs that said like gusty winds likely and falling rocks, and I was like, geez, it feels like we're in a video game. And after lunch we actually got stuck in a storm. It was such heavy rain, it felt like we were basically getting a car wash. And it's crazy, you can see here that the storm is right behind us, following us, so we drove out of the storm there. So the rest of that day, we drove through Colorado, and then at one point, we passed into Utah. So still a lot of rocky terrain, except Utah just has all these crazy geometric-like rocks. Don't quote me on this, I really don't know what I'm talking about in terms of geology and everything, but I just know that it was so hot that day, and I'm sure that's just how it is most of the summer, and maybe even year-round. One thing Young said was that rural Utah made him feel at awe and also timid, and I definitely agree with that. there were a couple signs that said no rest stop for X amount of miles, and it was crazy just to be in the middle of nowhere. So that's why I have some really dramatic music at this part in the video, because it was kind of a surreal day just driving through Utah. But there were also so many spots along the road to stop and look out, and so we stopped at Black Dragon Canyon. It was really beautiful, and I got some cool photos there. So we actually stayed the night in Cedar City, Utah, and it was also insane to just drive through basically the middle of nowhere for the whole day and then show up in the city, and you don't even see it until about 5 minutes before you exit. Like I said, we stayed the night in Utah in Cedar City, and then this is actually the next day when we were finishing driving through Utah, and then we finally made it to Arizona. I guess everyone driving from Utah through there to California goes through Arizona, but it's only for about 10 minutes, so I saw Arizona very briefly. So now to check in on my license plate game, I think I got 46 over the whole trip. I actually got Hawaii. When I got to California, I saw a Hawaii license plate. I was way too excited. So these markings on the mountains, I googled it, and apparently local communities put those up there as a symbol of pride or expression, so I thought that was cool. And finally, we made it to Nevada. And fun fact, this was one of the only places that we could stop and eat lunch along the whole route up to Los Angeles, because the rest of it is desert. So we stopped in Las Vegas. It was Sunday morning. I thought it was really funny. There's a little wedding right there on the left, a little wedding center. I thought that was hilarious. And yeah, in general, I just was laughing because I was like, this is the least likely place for me to be on a Sunday morning. But it was really interesting to see Las Vegas, but I don't really think I'm gonna be back, and I think that's all I have to say about that city. But we did have a really good lunch there. We finally crossed the border into California. It was so hot out there in the desert, and the highest temperature was 113 degrees. Oh, also we stopped at this inspection center, but we didn't even get inspected, so we kind of just drove through, which was fine. But these next couple of clips just describe how it felt to drive through that day, because it was so hot. Even though we had air conditioning, I'm not a desert girl, and it was definitely the most uncomfortable leg of the trip. We were both so sweaty, and then we got stuck in traffic because there was an accident. But I just thought it was kind of funny because, you know, when you think of LA, everyone talks about how bad the traffic is. But once we got into Society, we saw so many different types of trees. That was fun. There's so many varieties that I'd never seen before. And I also really love just the Spanish style exteriors of houses, I guess just in the West and in the desert regions of the US in general. And I love how many colorful houses and buildings there are in California. I haven't been on the West Coast since I was like 2 years old. Besides Portland, I go there sometimes, but I hadn't been to California in a long time, and so I was basically experiencing it for the first time. The weather here is amazing. I feel so basic for saying that, but once we got out of the car and felt the breeze here, it was just indescribable. And I made Young take me to the beach the first night we were here because I was like, we made it this far. We drove across the whole country, and I just want to see the ocean. So thank you so much for watching this video, and please like and comment if you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye.